Usually we stand for the gospel, but this is a rather long passage, so I'm going to invite you to listen to it seated. But before I read the passage, I want to ask you to listen to it in its many layers. It's a healing story. It's a healing story of Jesus healing a man who had been born blind. But there are other types of blindness that are included in it. So pay attention to what people can see clearly and the things that people cannot see. Pay attention also to the back and forth between the man who had been healed, who seems to bounce around in the story, and he keeps recounting the story over and over again. And track how he begins to refer to Jesus increasingly in terms of a developing faith. Now, there were some who wanted to use the healed man to attack Jesus. All, even his parents, are distancing themselves from him. All the while, Jesus was nowhere to be found. The gospel lesson is John 9, verses 1 through 41. As Jesus walked along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him. We must work the works of the one who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I'm in the world, I am the light of the world." When Jesus had said this, he spat on the ground and made mud with the saliva and spread the mud on the man's eyes, saying to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. Then he went and washed and came back able to see. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" And some were saying, "It is he." Others were saying, "No, but it's someone like him." He kept saying, "I am the man." But they kept asking him, "Then how were your eyes opened?" He answered, "The man called Jesus made mud, spread it on my eyes, and said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' Then I went and washed and received my sight." They said to him, "Where is he?" He said, "I don't know." They brought him to the Pharisees, the man who had formerly been blind. Now, it was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. And the Pharisees began to ask him how he had received his sight. He said to them, "He made mud. He put mud on my eyes. Then I washed, and now I see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not observe the Sabbath." But others said, "How can a man who is a sinner perform such signs?" And they were divided. So they said again to the blind man, "What do you say about him? It was your eyes he opened." He said, "He's a prophet." The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked them, "Is this your son, who you say was born blind? How then does he now see?" His parents answered, "We know that this is our son and that he was born blind. But we do not know how it is that now he sees, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him. He's of age. He will speak for himself." His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews. For the Jews had already agreed that anyone who confessed Jesus to be the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore, his parents said, "Ask him. He's of age." So for the second time, they called the man who had been blind, and they said to him, "Give Give glory to God. We know that this man Jesus is a sinner. He answered, I do not know whether he is a sinner. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see. They said to him, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? He answered them, I have told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples? Then they reviled him, saying, you're his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he comes from. The man answered, here's an astonishing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but God does listen to one who worships God and obeys God's will. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. They answered him, you were born entirely in sins, and are you trying to teach us? And they drove him out. Jesus heard that they had driven him out. And when he found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of God? He answered, and who is he, sir? Tell me, so that I may believe in him. Jesus said to him, you have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he. He said, Lord, I believe. And he worshipped him. And Jesus said, I came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see may see, and those who do see may become blind. Some of the Pharisees near him heard this and said to him, surely we're not blind, are we? Jesus said to them, if you were blind, you would have no sin. But now that you say, we see, your sin remains. Friends, this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. In my Bible, this story is entitled, A Man Born Blind Receives His Sight. But I think it just could have easily have been titled, The Invisible Man. No one fully saw this man before he was healed. They simply saw another beggar seeming to blend into the background. There must have been many other beggars. There must have not been remarkable to have one more there. Someone must have known at least enough about him to know that he had never had sight. He had always been blind from birth. At no point do we hear his name. He's just, the blind guy over there. Even when he gets healed, they see right past him. No one seems ready to believe him or trust him or include him. He's easy to beat up, to blame, to dismiss. He's a nobody. Talking about him, they were talking about him as though he was not even there. And I'm struck in this story that no one is happy for him. No one is happy that he can see for the first time ever. Jesus' disciples from the very beginning treat him as a case study. So who sinned? Because he's blind, so somebody must have done something wrong. Was it him? Was it his parents? The neighbors treat him as an imposter. He just had his eyes restored. It's not like he changed physically, but they could. Is this the guy? Was this the guy that was there? No, I think it is. No, I don't think so. The religious authorities treat him as bait because they want to get to Jesus. So they want his scoop. so they can catch Jesus having done something wrong. And it's because of that healing taking place on the Sabbath. The authorities were bent out of shape about that. That healing, though, boy, it has that ancient feel to it, doesn't it? What's with the mud? What's with the spitting and the making of the mud and the spreading? There's another healing that Jesus does in another part, in another gospel actually, where it's just the saliva. Jesus just puts some spit on him. But this one is mud. He's making this thing and go and wash. Goes outside, says go to this pool that's just outside the city walls and wash. How did he get there? I don't know. He got there. He wipes his eyes and he sees. But you see, that thing about the Sabbath. Jesus seems intent on challenging a strict interpretation of that particular commandment of the Sabbath. Why didn't he heal him on a Friday or a Sunday? I mean, the guy has been born blind forever. Could have waited a day. That's why the religious authorities were so interested in making this man Exhibit A against Jesus, to take the law and to make a case against him. No one seemed interested in this man. No one seemed to have an emotional connection to the man born blind, not even his parents. They were reluctant to get tangled up in that local religious politic problem that was being shaped. I don't know. Yeah, he was born blind. Ask him. I don't know. Except Jesus. Jesus is the only one who sees him. He sees the Son of God. It's remarkable that when he received the sight, his very presence becomes an inconvenience to everyone around him. They didn't know what to do with him. He didn't fit in their world at all. He barely fit when he was a blind guy, but at least we put him in the corner. He wouldn't bother anybody. But now that he was there and he was different, he didn't fit. And the only one who sees him is Jesus. The only one who wants him to fit is Jesus. And then, as I was asking you to do when I was reading it, is this healed man throughout the story, we hear a progression of his faith, or at least the progression of how he understood who Jesus was, and how he began to see with his eyes and understand with his heart something about Jesus that had been revealed to him, something which others couldn't see, right? They weren't seeing Jesus either. They just saw a troublemaker from, some hick town somewhere. Buried early in the story is something which Jesus says, which I think ought to be the way we look at the entire story. It just ran right by it. It's almost like a set of glasses with which we read the story to see it for what it is. And that is, speaking of this man who had been born blind, pushing aside all the questions the disciples had about who sinned and who didn't sin, what Jesus says is, this man was born so that God's works might be revealed in him. That is how Jesus saw, not just him, how Jesus saw everyone. As someone through whom God works, through whom God shines. But in this story, everybody else was blind to that possibility. Being blind to someone's reality or someone's concerns may not be something we do on purpose, but I tell you, it's something that we can fall into rather easily when truly seeing that individual for who they are gets in the way of our reality, sort of bothers our perspective or perception. That flyer about the 1 great hour of sharing that you have in your bulletin makes me think about people who have been imprisoned and who are now back in their community. How do we see them when they come back? I mean, we talk in philosophical ways about people who have gone to prison as having paid their debt to society. But when you talk to people who have been there, who carry a felony on their record, they'll tell you that they never get out from under that shadow. With employment, with housing, with social benefits, even with how people, their neighbors, see them, even with the right to vote in some states. They always are under that shadow, and they are kept to the margins. Over there, stay in the corner, don't bother anybody. A potential employer sees the criminal record, they don't see the person. Now, some of us advocate for them, but sometimes that message is hard to be heard. And yet Jesus says that they were born so that God's works might be revealed in them. I think about people in our neighborhood, just walking distance from us, people who are struggling sometimes. I hear weekly the struggles that they go through, even if there are programs by churches or by the government or whatever where they're trying to help. But there are systemic barriers that get in the way that it's no one individual can overcome unless a community embraces them. Then there's a chance. People might drive by or walk by and make a judgment about the aesthetics of a home and make a judgment about the owner somehow because we know somehow, because of the outside, what's happening. We don't know. Some among us support and encourage, but that message is hard to hear sometimes. And yet Jesus says, they were born so that God's works might be revealed in them. When change comes into a community, there will be some who will always try to revert to the older version of the community. And there will be some who will see that change as the beginning of some new possibility, some new opportunity worth investing in. Jesus is bringing a truly disruptive perspective, a perspective which upends our long-held assumptions. And with that comes the tension that you sense in that passage we read. And so may this Lent continue to open our eyes to see more and more as Jesus sees. And with that vision, may we live knowing that everyone we meet was born so that God's works might be revealed in them. Thanks be to God for God's word for us.